Okay, how we doing, guys? This will be our first lore tome reading. The purpose of this lore tome reading is for people who don't want to read a bunch of paragraphs about our lore, and instead they just want the information fed to them through an audio format. You could do this while working out, taking a walk, while you're at work, whatever works for you. This is just for your convenience. We wanted to find a way to make consuming all of this lore less cryptic and also less, I guess tedious would be the word. It's supposed to be quality of life. Joining me today is going to be Lancer. He's going to read the Wrath voice lines coming down later, and you'll know it when you hear him. And currently I'm waiting on a response from Chronicler about what he wants to voice, but he'll be here too. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. This is Lore Tome Volume 1. Now, I'm going to read a disclaimer before we get started here with my formal narration. Disclaimer. The following information is gained from Artemis, the Gallivanter of Ragnarok. This information is liable to change in the future with the advent of new evidence and the completion of lore-focused missions within Theseus. When said information is updated, a new lore tome will be put out containing the updated information as well as any new information gained between the previous lore tome and the current one. That being said, please enjoy the first lore tome of Theseus, and happy anniversary.
The cluster, and by extension, the creation of Theseus. Far, far away, within the realms beyond Forgotten, where the astral that binds planets together is devoid of light and life, there exists what can only be described as a miracle in astrological biomes. A fully composed sphere consisting of over 50 planets, all rotating around one star. This sphere is known as the cluster, and would eventually house the planet now known as Theseus. The cluster sphere was helmed by the 7 gods, each born of a cosmic fate, a massive event that ended with birth. It all started with the draconic twins, the great worms Respiro and Gavetta. While Gavetta was born at the death of a star, Respiro was born along with his star. Black and white respectively, it almost seemed fated that these twins would battle. But one would be surprised to know that it didn't happen immediately. In fact, the two were considered on good terms for a majority of their lives. It was a balance. Gavetta became a devourer, a world destroyer. Anything to be consumed by her would be reduced to nothing. Not even ash. While Respiro had the unique power to create. Respiro could link the cluster to other worlds using his innate magic, which led to the first signs of life sprouting within the cluster and earning it the reputation of becoming a hub world. With Gavetta and Respiro came 5 other gods who eventually formed the cluster pantheon. Somnus, the god of tranquility, was soon to follow after, conjured from the sun in which the cluster rotated. Emerging from its flame, she awoke from her eternal slumber, intrigued by the people entering the cluster for the first time, and urging the other gods to not intervene with their progress. For the best action sometimes is inaction.
Wrath was born of humanity's first war within the cluster. Some legends say Wrath was once a warlord who ascended to the throne of gods from pure vexation, while others say he was birthed from the anger of all mortals. Regardless of his origins, Wrath was firm in his judgment, quick to protect the cluster from all invading evils that Respiro's portals may have conjured up.
May the fury I conjure breach the minds of all humans. For evil know naught of compassion. True evil, the bane of man, will not learn. They will not grow. They will not change. They exist only to be brought down by stronger, better men. I will be the face of this rage, this fury that will be used to protect us, no matter the cost.
Bleak, the god of joy's origins are currently unknown. Some say he was birthed when man first drew upon cave walls, the start of artistic expression. Others say he was an invader, a god from another realm banished to the cluster and swindled his way to the throne. Regardless of his reputation, Malik stands as the symbol of fun within the cluster. In his eyes, if it's boring, it does not matter. When man first pocketed coin on the cluster, Asia and Lazarus, the final gods of the cluster pantheon, were born. Asia created the social ladder that mortals follow, a code of sorts, the hierarchy that separates the rich from the poor. In his mind, the poor will be driven to success from envy. It is that seed of jealousy within man's mind that strives for him to do better, think smarter, talk wiser. Money, the inherent want, shall be the key to seeing great things happen in the mortal world.
Mortals crave competition. As long as there are two people alive, one of them shall be jealous of the other. That will be the birth of fuel, burning in an engine known as the human mind. Only the strongest of engines will be birthed and remembered as greats, while those that lack drive shall be buried and forgotten in the sands of time. Mortals are fickle. I truly pity them, but only if they choose not to pity themselves.
While Lazarus saw beauty in money itself, some even saying he was the embodiment of collection. Even the gods don't know what Lazarus saw in the piles and piles of wealth he'd accumulated over time, but he grew infatuated. Any wealthy person, regardless of whether they had earned that wealth or were born into it, became respected by Lazarus. This respect, among other things, is what potentially started the class war that spread between planets, ultimately culminating in the cluster's downfall. The End of Worlds. There were a select group of planets based around the inner rim of the cluster, composed of the first 25 or so planets that make up the sphere that the gods heavily favored. With their attention split between there and the planets of the outer rim, eventually, unbeknownst to the gods, their influence would start a class war in humanity. The planets became separated by a large, metallic ring that spanned multiple light years wide. It was built using the floating scraps of an asteroid belt. The humanoids who made it called it the Artemis. The 25 planets within the Artemis ring became known as the Inner Heavens, lands composed of the wealthy and the scholarly, with astute temperatures fit for humanoid life. Its people were educated, its food was plentiful, there were little wars to be found. Meanwhile, the planets outside the Artemis rim became known as the Outer Hells. These planets were cold, dark, and riddled with crime. The people partook in acts of sin, gambling, slavery, killing, and pillaging. The Outer Hells were the embodiment of everything Somnus wanted to avoid. Perceiving the suffering of all humans at the hands of her own pantheon, she drafted a proposal to its members, an act of inaction. The Pact of Abstinence was an ordinance filed by all 7 gods. They were all to be put into an eternal slumber, similarly to what Somnus had done to herself many, many years ago.
The gods would only awaken if their awakening condition would be met. Should that happen, the gods will be free to awake from their slumber, deal with the issue at hand, then guide themselves back to their eternal rest. For example, Respiro would awaken should the cluster face a sphere-destructing threat, while Gavetta would awaken after humanity commits a great sin and needed to be purged. Reluctantly, all gods agreed to the pact of abstinence, and thus they went to sleep. However, all of that changed when the people of the Outer Hells committed the great sin needed in order to awaken Gavetta. It's currently unknown why these humanoids committed the Gavettan blood ritual, a sacrifice that requires the offering of 10,000 humans. But for whatever reason, be it that they grew tired of the inner heavens or they were coerced into it, Gavetta was awoken. Her hunger, fierce, unending, she yearned for blood. Gavetta tore into the Outer Hills, cracking the planets with her gigantic maw, and leaving it nothing but space. Say, for a few surviving bit of planetary debris, perhaps even a planet or two, the Outer Hells was completely destroyed. Gavetta then set her sights on the Athenas, before finally being stopped by Respiro, who had met his awakening condition. Respiro couldn't believe his eyes. That someone he'd once considered a friend would go to this level of destruction. But he knew what he had to do. He couldn't let his pride get in the way of doing the right thing any longer. And so, a battle of great worm twins ensued, the shockwaves of which would be felt for light years away. Some say the battle lasted years, others say decades. Gavetta was severely wounded, but was nevertheless victorious, killing Respiro and sending his body towards a planet formerly known as Elabora. In his final moments, Respiro's magic surged throughout his body, creating a constantly active source of wild magic in the form of his very own corpse. While his body lay adrift in space, his intention was that adventurers from other worlds would be summoned by the portals he'd unintentionally create, giving way for the mortals to defeat Gavetta and finish what he started. In the aftermath of the destruction, a Warforged was put to sleep on the 42nd planet within the Outer Hells. Known as Theseus, the planet was known for having an abundance of portals, an unnatural abundance for a planet within the Outer Hells at least. A great mind from one of these portals, a man known only by the name he signed in his research journals, the Tinkerer. He was the creator of a Warforged named 42. She was designed to be a guide for immigrants, a cleric to those coming from broken worlds. Alas, her creation was overshadowed by the hills burning with fire and asphalt quaking from the storms of meteors crashing down. The apocalypse had neared. 42 was damaged, but was stowed away from the destruction in hopes that someday she may be able to aid people in the future and act as a guide that she was always meant to be. But in damaging herself, 42 questioned her own purpose. She could recall small bits and pieces of the world she used to come from, but nothing more. She had become nothing but a husk of wills from the forgotten past, the last remnant of a man who wanted nothing more than to help the lost.
Welcome home to Theseus! Welcome home to Theseus!
Meanwhile, a young tinkerer named Artemis from the planet Elabora became the first and only humanoid to happen upon Respiro's corpse. An artificer by trade, Artemis began conducting experiments on the corpse to figure out its arcane properties. He feasted upon it, gaining a semblance of immortality, but more importantly, Artemis carved the corpse of organs and bone to create a spelljammer he named Ragnarok.
Now left to roam the cluster, searching for answers among an endless void, Artemis has compiled everything he knows into a single file, the Artemis Tome. That is this document. He believes there's only one way to stop Gavetta, who currently is slowly but surely regaining her strength. To save the rest of the cluster, Artemis believes the only course of action would be to find a way to awaken the rest of the gods, to raise an army comprised of the forgotten pantheon. This, he believes, were why the Thesians were brought here, to avenge the fallen, born to a land wrought with sin, who were yet innocent, using the very gods themselves as blades.
Hey yo, it's me, Jumbo ABCDDE something. I forgot my name, but thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe and hit notification bell. Pretty please. And if you do, I'll come to your house and give you a bucket and then spray paint your wall for very good art. Please subscribe to the CCS YouTube channel.